What is the darkest, most disgusting secret in your past? NSFW/NSFL. Growing up, there was a kid a grade below me. He was kind of annoying, always cracking bad jokes, pretending to be a lot cooler than he actually was. The kind of kid calculated to drive a 12-year-old with anger issues into a frenzy. I kind of made tormenting him my personal project. We lived in a neighborhood, and there were plenty of bored, angry kids who were happy to go along with it. One of them was Jerome. Looking back, the kid was a sociopath. Basically roamed the streets, tortured bugs, pigeons, cats, probably eating a hooker's heart somewhere right now. Anyway, Jerome and I started chasing this kid after school. It started with name calling. We threw everything we could at him. He ignored it for a while, but I could tell we were getting at him. He stopped shooting back wisecracks and making goofy faces. He had to shut out a lot of the world to shut us out. Part of him just went dead. One day in 1990, we saw this kid playing ball and we decided to start on him again. I grabbed his ball. When he said, "Give it back," Jerome took it from me. With this cold look in his eye, he took out a knife and stabbed the ball. Then he shoved the kid up against the wall, started whispering about what he was going to do. Me and the other kids were freaked out, muttering for Jerome to cut it out, but it was scary as hell. Jerome actually has his knife on the kid's throat, and then something just happened. The kid knocks the knife away, and he flattens Jerome with one punch. Months of anger start pouring out of him, and he pummels and pummels Jerome, and we just watch. Jerome went unconscious early on, just this ragged animal gasping as his face got turned to hamburger. Finally, we pulled Will off him. Jerome went to the hospital, never came back to school. Will disappeared too. Heard he went to live with his aunt and uncle in California. Wonder whatever happened to him. I haven't told this to anyone but my older sister. Growing up as a kid in Colombia, I was born into a passion for football, soccer, not seen in many places, especially America. Back when I was born, Colombia was still a developing country and the cocaine industry was at its peak. There were two main teams in the capital city, one called Millonarios, the other called Santa Fe. Millonarios was the color blue, and Santa Fe was red. As you may assume, they were rivals. What I didn't know as a kid was that out of both teams the so-called hardcore fans became actual violent gangs which spread throughout the whole city. Our color was blue, the other team's color was red, so as you can imagine this was a Crip vs Blood type of scenario. All of my older cousins were part of the designated gang of our team, and I was the youngest one as I was pulled into the gang, but as you can imagine I had no idea what went on. All I remember was being at parties with my cousins just sitting in the corner playing with toys, and seeing a bunch of people with blue shirts and blue bandanas. One day when I was 3 we were walking in the barrio, the hood, the ghetto, in a group of almost 15. I was sitting on my cousin's, then 19 years old, shoulders when I heard the first gunshot. Quickly I feel my cousin's hand slap my face as he quickly grabs my head and pulls me close to him. I felt every step he took go through my body as he ran, and he ran a lot. Finally he put me behind a really big trash can which was against a wall. He told me to cover my ears and close my eyes, that no matter what happens, what I hear, what I smell, no matter what, I shouldn't open my eyes or uncover my ears. He looks at me, kisses my forehead and runs away. I was crying as you may imagine, and I rocked back and forth putting my hands against my ears and closing my eyes so tight they hurt. I didn't know how long it has been, but I decided to look for my cousin. I see many dead bodies and blood for the first time in my life. Remember I was 3. I stuck my head out to the side of the trash can and saw my cousin being stabbed multiple times in his chest. And that's when the police sirens became audible. As the gang members of the opposite side begin to run and my cousin bleeds to death, our eyes met. He smiled and, before I could smile back, I felt a female police officer grabbing me, throwing me in her car and driving off. I don't remember much of that ride or the few days after. I'll just never forget that day, that last smile. To this day I wish I could give everything I've ever had just to be able to smile back. Let him know just how much I loved him. He was more than just a cousin, he was my big brother, and I'll never forget him. R.I.P. One time in college I was drinking with friends who proceeded to shame me after I passed out in their company. Besides the usual stuff, like drawing on my face in permanent marker and pouring beer on me, they filled my ears with ketchup and mustard, and I think one of them peed on me. In any case, after talking to them the next day, I figured out it was mainly the work of two guys who were roommates. I laugh it off and pretend it didn't bother me, even though it took weeks to get all the out of my ears. So the day everyone left for our 3-week winter break, I urinated in a thin metal tray and put it in the freezer. After it froze, I emptied it to get a solid sheet of frozen piss, and I slid it under their dorm room door. Fast forward 3 weeks, and their entire dorm room smelled like piss, and I heard their carpet was technically alive. To make it even better, maintenance didn't get around to replacing the carpet for about a week after classes started up again, and the guys were charged damages. No one figured out how it was done, since the only people that had access to the dorm rooms were the RAs. I had a little 2cm sticker photo I got printed out at the seaside. It was a picture of me smiling. I used to get completely naked and stick it on the head of my penis, flaccid. I would then move my foreskin up and consume the picture. Once everything was set, I'd run out my room and find the first family member I could. They'd look at me and I'd shout, "Where is he?" Then they would respond in some fashion and I would reply, "Here he is," whilst furiously retracting my foreskin to expose the sticker. Dark times. Here is one that comes to mind. When I was around 6 or 7, me and my friend would always walk across this old ratty driving range as a shortcut to get home from school. There was almost always a few jackrabbits running around, and we would attempt to hit them with golf balls, always unsuccessfully. Finally one day I let one loose, and with a very audible crack I hit it directly in the head. It instantly fell over on its side and started to use its legs to push itself in large circles. Imagine Homer laying on his side and using his legs to run in circles. I was immediately filled with dread, and we ran over to see the thing, a numb desperate yawn in its eyes, large amounts of blood pouring from its ear as it was running circle after circle until it finally exhausted itself. It then laid there, staring up in the sky with its dumb red eyes, dying. I looked over at my friend, teary-eyed, and said we should put it out of its misery. He nodded. In our grief and young stupidity we could not think of any way to accomplish this, but by the way I had inflicted the initial wound. So we stood there, sobbing as hard as people can sob, as we ineffectually slammed down golf balls at this poor creature. I finally wised up after a few minutes, and grabbed a rock, but to this very day I still think about that king jackrabbit. When I was about 7 or 8, my grandmother, through my mother, who I'd never met, came to visit. My mother had recently divorced, and times were rough, so her estranged mother visiting was her only bright point in recent months. Being the misfit I was, when the adults were outside I rummaged through my grandmother's things. I found a weird device that, when squeezed, shot out a puff of wet air. I now know it was a rescue inhaler. I played with it until it went empty, and so it was boring. Later that day, the family was outside and my grandmother, who I assume had COPD or something, had a terrible coughing fit, and collapsed to her knees. She grabbed her rescue inhaler, squeezed, and obviously nothing came out. The next thing I know, her face turned blue and her blood vessels were clearly visible from the lack of air and the coughing. Apparently the stress from the coughing fit caused a blood vessel to rupture in her head. The EMTs said she was dead before she hit the ground. I have always wondered if I should tell my mother that I may have killed her mother on accident, but I'm terrified of what she might think of me. This was about 19 years ago. I was in the stall taking her after lunch in 7th grade. My friend comes into the bathroom and starts throwing paper towel into my stall. Next I hear him walk up to the urinal, which is a stall away to my right. I reach into the toilet and throw one of my turds over the stalls, and it smacks the ground by his foot with a nasty splat, and it exploded all over his shoes and bottom of his jeans. I heard him scream, then run out. I had to run out of my stall and pick the turd up with paper towel, while another kid came in and saw me doing that. My hands smelled like, even after washing them 3 times, and my friend smelled worse. My freshman year of high school, I went on a trip to Disney World with the marching band. We were on our way to ride Splash Mountain when I realized that I really needed to take I was too shy to ask my entire group of friends to take a bathroom break, so I could poop, so I just squeezed my cheeks and hoped that I could hold it all in until someone else needed to go to the bathroom. We were about halfway there when I decided that it would be safe to squeeze out a little fart to take some of the pressure off my bowels. Worst decision ever. What either would be a tiny discreet fart turned into a full-size turd erupting into my undies. Luckily, the turd was pretty firm and dry, so it just kinda sat there, cradled in the crotch of my underwear for a few seconds. Then, with a swift adjustment of my underwear, the log just rolled out of my skirt and plopped to the ground. I looked back about 5 seconds later, and the was gone. Some park sanitation ninja must have scooped it up about as soon as it hit the ground. As far as I know, none of my friends noticed, but I always wonder if at least one of them will forever remember me as that girl who in the middle of Disney World. So, yep, I took her in Disney World in high school because I was too afraid to ask my friends to stop for a bathroom break. This isn't really that dark or anything, but it is pretty hilarious. So my uncles all hunt and they would go to a taxidermist and get some of the things stuffed. I was about 7 or 8, and they brought home these 2 huge stuffed bears. Not stuffed toys or anything. Actual stuffed bears. And they were posed to stand and got set up in the playroom at my grandmother's. I don't really remember what my thought or motivation behind it was, but I have a distinct memory of sitting on the floor cross-legged, and this bear's private area was right in my face. And for whatever the king reason, I was like, oh, what is that little nub? I'm going to wrap my lips around it. About 20 seconds later I realize it was a penis, and then freak out, because I thought I was pregnant. When I was a kid I went to jump off a diving board, and I slipped on one side pretty much landing on my vagina in a sideward split. There was a ton of blood and I only had a small tiny cut down there. I'm pretty positive my hymen broke because of it, but I never talked to my mom about it after it happened. 4 years ago I found my girlfriend on the floor of her bathroom after having shot herself. We were pretty much inseparable for quite a few years, so people tend to bring up whatever happened to her a lot. Because of that, I actually have a somewhat elaborate lie that I tell people so I don't have to tell them the truth. In 3rd grade, I cheated on my history exam. In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Mac's toupee and I glued it on my face when I was Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs, and I blamed it on the dog. When my mom sent me to the summer camp for fat kids, and then they served lunch I went nuts and I pigged out, and they kicked me out. But the worst thing I ever done, I mixed a pot of fake puke at home, and then I went to this movie theater, hid the puke in my jacket, climbed up to the balcony and then, I made a noise like this, hooah 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 hooah, and then I dumped it over the side, all over the people in the audience. And then, this was horrible, all the people started getting sick and throwing up all over each other. I never felt so bad in my entire life. When I was in the 6th grade, there was a girl in my class named Jenna who was horrible to me. She constantly made fun of me. I was a shy bookish girl, and once even had a birthday party and invited everyone in my class except for me. In the 6th grade we had a project called Egg Babies. Basically we all got a hard-boiled egg that we had to treat like a baby, make a little nest/basket for it, and take care of it. We weren't supposed to even leave it out of our sight, the idea being to teach us responsibility. Apparently our class was king around too much with the egg babies, so our teacher told us that at the end of the week, if our egg was cracked, we would get an F. One day while the class was out at recess, I was allowed to come back into the classroom to get my inhaler. Jenna had left her egg inside the classroom. I looked around, then walked over to her egg and tapped it on the desk, breaking the bottom. Then I put it back in her basket and went back out to recess. Jenna ended up failing the project because her egg was broken. She was really off. I never told anyone, and I still don't regret it. You, Jenna,